Hello and welcome to our weekly look inside Syria. I'm Sami Zaidan. Well, it's been a week of major developments for Syria's Kurds, the largest non-Arab ethnic minority in the country. Well, on Tuesday, the main Kurdish militia issued a call to arms against factions fighting the Assad regime. This followed the killing of a leading Syrian Kurdish politician in a car bomb attack near the Turkish border. Isa Huso, a member of the Supreme Kurdish Council, was targeted outside his house in Qamishli. Well, the incident raises questions about where the Kurds stand in Syria's confusing and bloody conflict. Imran Khan has more.
For Syria's Kurds, the death of this man, Isa Huso, may well be a turning point in their bid to maintain control of what they say is Kurdish territory. In the days after his death, there have been battles between Kurdish fighters and armed men from al-Qaeda allied groups. The fighting happened in the northern Kurdish majority region of Akbik, near the Turkish border. For the last year, it's been controlled by the Kurds after President Bashar al-Assad's forces withdrew. Almost immediately, the rebels tried to take over the territory, but they were beaten back. Since then, the Kurds enjoyed a degree of independence after long complaining of discrimination under the Assad government. But now that relative autonomy is under threat. There are many Syrians who fear the Kurds are using the conflict to carve out a separate state, but the main Kurdish party says it's simply defending its own people. But now, given the assault on them by al-Qaeda-linked groups, some Syrian Kurds are calling for an alliance with the very group that they say oppressed them in the past, President Bashar al-Assad's army. All of this means that the conflict in Syria is further dividing people along ethnic lines. Imran Khan for Inside Syria.
Well, before we start the discussion, let's just explain a little background about the Kurds. They're largely Sunni Muslims with their own language and culture. Most of them live in the generally contiguous areas of Turkey, Iraq, Iran and Syria. There are different, though, and sometimes conflicting Kurdish groups in each country. The divisions don't end at the borders. The Kurds living inside Syria are also divided politically into two major groups. There's the Democratic Union Party, or PYD, and the Kurdish National Council, or KNC. Well, the PYD is considered the strongest Syrian Kurdish group with its well-armed militias. It's also affiliated with Kurds in Turkey of the Kurdistan Workers' Party, the PKK. Well, on the other hand, the Kurdish National Council is affiliated with Iraqi Kurds of the Kurdistan Regional Government. Well, just 2 weeks ago, fighters allied to the Democratic Union Party, or PYD, captured the town of al-AIN from anti-Assad regime al-Nusra fighters. Well, to discuss this, we're joined by our three guests. In Istanbul, Monzer Akbik, he's a member of the Syrian National Coalition. In Amsterdam, Vladimir van Wilgenburg, who's a political analyst from the Jamestown Foundation, specialises in Kurdish politics. And in Essex in the UK via Skype, Alan Semo, representative of Foreign Affairs and Relations Office of the Democratic Union Party, or PYD, in the UK. Welcome to all of you, gentlemen. If we could start with Alan first of all. I guess the basic question is, are the Syrian Kurds part of the revolution against the Assad regime or not?
Yeah, of course they are. They have been actively contributed to the democratic change for this against this brutal regime, and they have been always contributing to developing a multicultural, multi-democratic Syria. And since the democratic uprising, peacefully and democratic, the Kurds was in the front of demonstration peacefully and democratically. But since the democratic movement of the revolution distorted to a militarization of the revolution, the Kurds have not wanted keep it away from this brutal civil war and wanted a democratic, a peaceful change against this brutal regime.
Can I get you to explain, what do you mean by keep it away? Keep this war away from us. Can you keep the war away from you and be part of a military revolution or militarized revolution?
Yeah, keep it away from this brutal regime, because the revolution, the uprising now in Syria is not for the democratic change in Syria. It is a militarization provided and supported by the Gulf state and facilitated by regional and international powers to change the seat of the power. We don't want it to just change the seat of power from the Alawite or from Shiite to Sunnite. So we wanted a change for a democratic, plural Syria. All the Syrian people can representing themselves freely and democratically. And therefore, we keep it away, this brutal, we don't want to be part of this brutal civil war.
Okay, let's bring Vladimir into the discussion. If I could bring Vladimir in, and we will come back to you in a moment, Alan, but if I can bring Vladimir into the discussion at this point. As you can hear from Alan Shimo, he's a representative of the most dominant, shall we say, Syrian Kurdish group in the country. They would say we are part of the revolution. They're not with the opposition forces, though. They fought both the opposition and government forces. What do they want? Do they want to be part of Syria, or to be perhaps have their own sort of third zone of influence in the country?
Well, you shouldn't forget that the Kurds already had their own uprising against the regime in 2004 in Qamishli. So they already rose up against Assad government before the others did. But basically the strategy of most of the Kurdish parties, the nationalist ones, is that they want to protect the Kurdish areas. They're trying to control as much as they can the Kurdish areas in the northern part of Syria. And all of them are saying that they don't want to separate from Syria. So they're saying they want to have some form of self-governance. But of course, some people in the opposition, they don't agree with this neutrality. They want them to actively also go to Damascus and help them there. But basically the Syrian Kurds in general, most of the Syrian Kurds, they say we want to protect our own areas and we want to keep the civil war out of our areas.
All right, perhaps we'll go to Monzer now. The fact that you do have a Kurdish uprising, but they haven't joined main opposition groups like yours, isn't that a failing of the Syrian National Coalition, a failing to be more inclusive and to bring them into the opposition ranks?
Not at all, because there are Kurds in the coalition. We have 4 members now. 2 of them are in the leadership, which is the political committee of 19 people, and there are 3 seats for the higher committee, the Kurdish higher committee, reserved for them. The seats are still empty now because of the disagreements between the Kurdish parties themselves. But now I'm hearing good news that those 3 seats are going to be filled soon. But I have to clarify, there are 2 or 3 not accurate statements that I have heard. First of all, I've heard that the fight is now between Alawite regime and Sunni people. Actually, the fight is not that at all. We have in our opposition, in the opposition and the FSA, from all the Syrian sects and ethnicities. They are fighting the undemocratic, the dictatorship regime. So it's not at all a fight between Alawite and the Sunnis. It is a fight for freedom and democracy. Number 2, the Kurdish areas, which has been said. Actually, the people I am from Damascus, and the people who are from Syria and know Syria very well. They know that the Kurdish Syrians, they are distributed all over the country, not only in the northern part. We have in Damascus a large neighborhood of Kurdish in Rukn al-Din. There are in Aleppo also a lot of them in Latakia also province. And also in the north, where there's a fight now between the PYD and al-Qaeda affiliated groups, there are also Kurds, but also there are Arab ethnicity, and there are also Syriac Christians over there also. So we cannot say that there are pure Kurdish areas in that sense.
Okay, Monzer, if I could jump in here, though. You do say your organization includes Kurds, but your organization doesn't include the 2 largest parties, neither the Democratic Unity Party, or PYD, of which Mr. Allen is a representative and member of, nor do you include the Kurdish National Council. Can you really be inclusive? Can you really say you speak for the Kurds in Syria when you don't include these 2 major blocs?
Well, the 3 seats that I was talking about was for the Higher Commission, the Kurdish Higher Commission, which includes the parties that you have talked about. And we have invited, upon the establishment of the coalition, invited the Kurdish parties to choose 3 members to take over those 3 seats. And until now, this didn't happen, not because of the coalition, because the Kurdish parties did not agree on the 3 people that they want to take those seats. But still,
okay, fair point.
And
Monzer, let me bring Alan in for a quick interjection there. Does Monzer's Syrian National Coalition speak for you?
No, they don't, and is not a democratic elected coalition and inclusive all the Syrian people.
But he says they've allocated, hang on Alan, he says they've allocated 3 seats for an umbrella organization that includes your organization.
That's right, and he couldn't answer your question, and I'm going to clarify that. Right, there have been 3 seats reserved for the Kurdish people in Syria, but these 3 seats has been suggested they will be filled with the representative of the High Commission of the Syrian Kurdish Council, Syrian Kurdish Commission, but the gentleman mentioning that there are some Kurds, saying in leadership 2-3 Kurds, which is representing none of the political or none of the organizational Kurdish movement.
Okay, Alan, let me jump in again and ask you then, what is it that major Kurdish, Syrian Kurdish parties like yours want? Do you want autonomy, independence, or to be part of a united Syria?
No, I think Valdemir explained it very well. So we Kurds in Syria, we wanted to have self-ruling, self-democratic ruling in our areas. And I do agree with there are some Kurds spread in Aleppo, Sheikh Maqsoud Ashrafiyya, and Ruknuddin in another area in Syria. Therefore, we wanted to have a regional self-governing. A regional self-governing means that the people in the Kurdish region, they can govern themselves, but this governing is integrated to united Syria.
Okay, you've made the point clear. Let me take that point back to Monzer. Monzer, do you have a problem, and does your organization have a problem with that vision which Alan is outlining there?
Well, he just said that, yes, there are a lot of Kurds in other areas other than the northern areas. So I don't know how this regional autonomy is going to be established, or self-ruling, or something like that, if the Kurds are already distributed in all the Syrian lands. And by the way, there are many of them are fighting also with the FSA. Now,
what are you saying? Are you saying that regional self-rule is not on in the opinion of the Syrian National Coalition?
There are no pure Kurdish areas, number 1. Number 2, the project of the coalition is a democratic state, which is neutral to all the Syrian citizens, whatever is their ethnicity or sect. And also, we are thinking of some kind of uncentralized governors of the provinces, which means that the local affairs in the provinces that can be taken care by the local council. But regarding the Syrian centralized government in terms of borders and in terms of ruling and sovereignty, no, our position is that the Syria within the current borders in full sovereignty, and we don't agree on self-ruling for any province in Syria.
All right, we're going to continue this discussion, but we're clearly getting into a territory here of what you're pointing out, Monzer, that there are different, perhaps, opinions within the Kurdish camp. So maybe it's time to thank our guest here, Alan Semo, for his contribution to the show this far.
Thank you.
And let's welcome into the show the President of the Kurdistan National Assembly, Mr. Sherko Abbas. Thanks so much for joining this discussion. Before I come to you, Sherko, let's go to Vladimir. I think where the discussion is going here is that there is a range of opinion amongst the different Syrian Kurdish groups and communities. Can they be simplified in terms of saying it's simply a reflection of the different regional forces that are at play and backing different Syrian Kurdish groups?
Yes. You could say that because the Supreme Kurdish Commission or High Council has two major power blocks inside of the council. One of them is the PYD, which rivals say is more closer to the PKK. The other major power bloc is the Kurdish National Council, which has as well, there are basically also two blocks inside the Kurdish National Council. One bloc is more closer to the president of Iraq, Jalal Talabani, and other Kurdish parties are more close to Masoud Barzani. Those three power blocks, basically, you could call them the Kandil bloc, which is the PKK, the Slemani bloc, which is Talabani, and the Erbil bloc, which is Barzani. Most of them agree on a sort of common future of the Syrian Kurds, which is like a self-governing, some form of self-governing future for the Kurds in Syria. But the Kurds who are represented by the Istanbul bloc, they want to have a lighter form of decentralization. So like Mr. Abdul Basit Seyda, who's one of the main figures of the Kurdish bloc in Istanbul, and which is part of the Syrian National Coalition. So you could say there are like, if you generalize, you could say there are four blocks, Istanbul, Erbil, Slemani, and Kandil.
All right, let's go to Mr. Sherko Abbas now. Is the Kurdish goal and Kurdish aspirations, are they being lost in all the divisions between Syrian Kurds?
First of all, thank you for inviting me to your program. I disagree with your guest here. The issue is, in some way, I do agree there are three axes here, a triangle. One is obviously by supported by Turkey, Muslim Brotherhood, which is Mr. Seyda, and that is really insignificant. They have no basis in the Kurdish region in Syria, very low support. But there's the other triangle that I'm talking about, that's a sideline, but the triangle I'm talking about here, Kandil, which is a PKK ally, PYD, and then a group part of Barzani, and also a group part of Talabani's side. Those three, they do have influence on them, and unfortunately, all are making the mistake, and they have not learned from the history that allying with Khomeini, overthrowing the Shah, it did not help the Kurds. Allying with the Shah to undermine Iraqi Saddam Hussein, it did not help. The Kurds lost. Allying with Assad, PKK in the 80s, and they finally handed him over to Turkey and his President Abdullah Öcalan. So the Kurds have not learned from their experiences. Working with the regional countries, those countries have interest.
So sorry, Abbas, you started off your answer by saying you disagree with Vladimir there, but you seem to be underscoring everything he's saying. The Kurds are divided. Doesn't this really undermine your aspirations?
The point I want to make. The point I want to make here, those group has, what I would like to say, probably they do not have even 30% of the Syrian Kurdish support. The majority of the Syrian Kurdish support, they're absolutely just like the Syrian revolution, are on the sideline, do not accept these three. And these three, they're trying to force themselves by allying the Kurds, either Sunni triangle or a Shiite triangle or sphere, or if you want to look at a crescent. So at this moment, we see on the Talabani side,
okay, if we could, Sherko, let's jump then to the question then, as you read the Kurdish, the Syrian Kurdish street then, what do they want? What do the Syrian Kurds want in a sort of post-Assad settlement?
Most Kurds in Syria want a Kurdish federation in Syria, a Kurdish federal region to be recognized, Syria to be decentralized federal, where the Kurds have a federation, Alawites, Sunni, Druze, and all the components such as Christian and others to have autonomy within those federations. Loosely federated Syria
not
is
a
the
regional
best
government
to stop
for Kurds?
this war, and I think that you know what, this is their right, their God-given right, and it should be. This is the only way to do it. And now working with either Iran or working with Turkey or working with Assad, it does not serve. In the past experiences, Kurds should learn. In this case here, the KNC of the Kurdish National Council and PYD working, whether either via Iran and Syria or Turkey or KRG, it is not serving the Kurdish interest. The Kurdish interest is stay neutral. It's not our fight to be part of this, the Sunni crescent or Shia crescent. We should stay the neutral, but we absolutely, with the Syrian revolution, we want a regime change. At this moment, we do not want to be part of this game. The Kurdish political parties in Syria want change. In 2004, they wanted uprising. They uprised against the regime. They want a regime change. And the Syrian Kurdish political party that your guest just mentioned, most of them, they were nowhere to be found. They were behind the Syrian, the Kurdish revolution. In fact, they are trying to milk these issues and lead it. And this is not healthy for the democracy in the region.
All right, let's go back to Monzer if we could. We had a slightly different perspective there from Mr. Sherko Abbas. At the end of the day, though, is it not the person with the most guns who will decide the reality that prevails on the ground in Syria? And that's one of your weak points, is it not, Mr. Monzer?
Yeah, we have, first of all, to also again set the record straight and say the facts. Now, no Kurdish party for the time being can claim that they have the streets behind them. The Kurdish street, is not necessarily connected with the parties, but of course part of it with several parties are over there. Now, the PYD is the only armed party of the Kurdish groups, and now they are not in a fight with FSA. They are a fight with the al-Qaeda affiliated groups. The coalition and FSA has nothing to do with that fight. They are not part of that fight. Now, the news is that last night we were in a meeting with the president of the coalition, and we have offered to Kurdish leaders that FSA could actually go and act as a separation between the fighting groups. The coalition does not agree with that fight and also does not agree with the method of both parties, which both parties in this fight, which is the al-Qaeda affiliated groups and the PYD. Now, the other fact is, again, we have to say again and again that there are no pure areas where the Kurdish people are there. They are all mixed areas. So the matter of autonomy or self-ruling cannot be established geographically. And at the same time, we have also to always confirm that the federation, I heard the word federation, which is ethnic or sectarian federation. This is a recipe for a continuous war forever.
Because we've just got literally seconds left. I think Sherko wants to get in here. Very briefly, Sherko.
Excuse me. Yeah. I think your guest, he does not understand the concept of democracy. Democracy, when people rule themselves within this. The Kurds have the right. The most, 1959, according to the Soviet Union census, there were 4.3 million Syrian, 1.45 million were Kurds. Now, most of them have, probably 2/3 of the Kurds being Arabized, and most of the fighting in Jisr, Shughur, Idlib, Hama, those are the Kurds are fighting that they become Arab jihadists. Now, there's about close to 4 million Kurds do exist in the Kurdish region in Syria along the border with Turkey. That region exists. So the Syrian regime Arabized the Kurdish region and they Arabized the Kurds, and today they're doing ethnic cleansing. They did ethnic cleansing in the Kurds, and now they're doing religious cleansing.
We've got a few seconds left on this show, Sherko, so I'm going to try and bring Vladimir in. To a certain extent, if there is perhaps regional cooperation, Vladimir, between Turkey and between the Kurdistan regional government in Iraq, could that help to bring some unity between the Kurdish factions, which are backed by different sides?
Well, it depends on if they decide to work together with the PYD, and Mr. Saleh Muslim was recently invited to come to Turkey to discuss this kind of issues, and also Mr. Necevyan Barzani, the Prime Minister of the Kurdistan Regional Government, visited Turkey. So if they could agree with each other to make an agreement to have some form of system recognized in the northern parts of Syria where the Kurds dominate, maybe then there could be more unity, because in the end the Syrian National Coalition is hosted in Istanbul, so they also have to cooperate. So in the end it could serve to more unity. But in the end, most of the Kurdish groups, they have a sort of similar discourse, apart from those Kurds who are represented in the Syrian National Coalition, who do not have a lot of support, to be quite frank with you.
Let's end it here and let's thank our guests in Istanbul, Monzer Akbik, in Amsterdam, Vladimir van Wilgenburg, and in Detroit, Sherko Abbas. And let's thank you for joining us. Remember, Al Jazeera has extensive and continuing coverage of what's happening in Syria, not just on this program, but of course on our hourly news programs too, and of course online at aljazeera.com. I'm Sami Zaidan. Thanks for watching Inside Syria. Goodbye for now.